So we're going to turn our attention really now to sort of our hybrid and multi-cloud ambitions. The public cloud is a fraction, and any one public cloud is a fraction of a fraction, but the public cloud is a fraction of the overall cloud opportunity. And what we mean by that is that there are multiple components of the overall cloud, and we think that's the biggest prize to be had in this market, right? So you have multi-cloud, and so that really is the ability to run not only on one cloud, but on every single cloud. And so AWS, Azure, Google, Oracle, IBM, that list can go much, much longer. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, what public cloud runs on another public cloud today? And the answer is really no, none, right? But that's the opportunity. That's what multi-cloud means, is the ability for your application to run seamlessly across multiple clouds. The hybrid cloud is the one that we're very well familiar with. It's been a very hot topic, and you see entire television commercial campaigns dedicated to it. But that really talks about this concept of your equipment on your hardware running in your data center or on some colo as your private cloud, and then also the public cloud, and the ability to work in both of those environments seamlessly from an application perspective. Now, this is an area where the big three have obviously made some investments, right? Outpost, Anthos, Stack are equivalent versions of those investments. But they're not really hybrid in the sense that they're really mono-cloud deployments with just a different form factor than what you're used to, right? They roll those things in, but it's still their equipment and their software, and it's just connected over a longer network cable. And so that's not really hybrid cloud. And so we think that there's a lot of opportunity still to be mined in that space. We think that's an area of interest for the big three, but it's also not an area where they've been particularly successful. I think the third area, when you talk about multi-cloud and hybrid cloud and the overall cloud opportunity, has to be the Kubernetes distributions and the edge. And the Kubernetes distributions in particular are of great interest to us. OpenShift and Tanzu are obviously the big players in this space, but Esmeralda, Rancher, SUSE are right there, and they're going to be players, and there's going to be a relatively distributed market. But the question you have to ask yourself again is, what public cloud player has announced that they are on Tanzu, right? None. We're a design partner there, right? We know that. OpenShift, again, same concept. What public cloud player is running themselves on OpenShift? And the answer, again, is none. And so what you see is this overall fraction. And so any single cloud, even one the size of Amazon, is but a fraction of a fraction, right? Because they're a fraction of a single cloud, and the opportunity is much bigger than that. And so it's a fraction of a fraction.
Jonathan, I have a question about this slide. I mean, you mentioned OpenShift and VMware Tanzu. Of course, nobody of the hyperscaler built a cloud on top of them, but actually they are building a cloud on top of AWS, Azure, and Google, and maybe others. So if you look at OpenShift now, you can have it as a service across multiple clouds. So they are building an abstraction layer, and you can deploy your application everywhere with them, or even with VMware with VCF that supports Tanzu. So it's somehow, this is like the last point turns back to the first one. So there are some players that are building clouds on top of clouds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually.
Go ahead, AB.
Yeah, so that is what we actually want as well, and we are there when if you see the customers that they want, just like they want MinIO everywhere in the same cloud, having same Tanzu or OpenShift on the same cloud gives them the same familiar Kubernetes interface as compared to GKE, AKS. While they are compatible for the services, the application containers, managing these independent infrastructure is still, there are cloud-specific extensions, right? What customers are looking for is can I also run OpenShift on all these clouds? And that is a new initiative, and we are working with both VMware and Red Hat on these. You'll hear about us in these initiatives as well. It's something very interesting for us because that's what customers are gravitating towards. They really look at public cloud as now infrastructure as a service that is nothing but CPU, network, and drive as service given as a API-driven infrastructure.
So what is our case for dominance in the, not the fraction of the fraction, but of the whole, right? And it starts with our expertise in S3, compatible object storage, and then Kubernetes. So those are two things that we have invested deeply in. They've paid very significant dividends for us. And that allows us to run on every single public cloud. It allows us to run and be dominant and to have a very, very strong position in the private cloud. And so we're native to those as a storage layer to those environments. And that's where we have this massive head start. So we already have 560,000 active hosts on AWS, Azure, and GCP right now. So we've quietly built that. We don't even promote that from a marketing perspective. We're going to start pushing harder on that on a go-forward basis. But we've already had architects bring us into those environments in huge numbers, right? And so they're running MinIO inside of these clouds, and they do so for a variety of different reasons. There's consistency, there's performance. They like the MC experience that we have. But whatever it may be, it just tells you that we probably have more hosts running in the public clouds than they have collectively running on the private cloud through Outpost, Anthos, and Stack. And so we're already down the road in terms of this vision of being dominant in the hybrid and multi-cloud. The second part of it is that, as you know from our previous storage field day, that we are one of the design partners for Tanzu. We're also on OpenShift. We're also on Ezmeral. We're also on Rancher SUSE. So we're on every single Kubernetes distribution there is today. So we are dominating in the private cloud. We're in the public cloud. And you won't find these appliances in those environments today. And so it's a very, very different story. We're looking at this as a whole, not as a fraction of a fraction. And that's what's going to make a difference on a go-forward basis. So let me break it down for you and make it really simple in terms of what our strategy is for the hybrid and multi-cloud. Right? No one is going to beat AWS 3 on AWS, right? S3 API is the standard for cloud storage. But we don't have to beat AWS on AWS. We just have to beat AWS everywhere else. And I've just showed you the stats on the last slide and then on the stats earlier on the About MinIO part that we're doing this today, right? We are beating AWS on the hybrid cloud. We're beating AWS on the Kubernetes distribution. We're beating AWS on the edge. And we're beating AWS in the multi-cloud because we're the only ones that actually run on Google and Azure and AWS and Oracle and IBM today. So this isn't something that's overly ambitious. This is actually something that we're doing today, right? This isn't just a pie in the sky dream. We're actually doing this today. And it's a very simple strategy, and it's one that we can win. And again, because we've proven that we can win it. Is it going to get harder? Absolutely. But we have a huge head start on the rest of the industry in sort of being the major player for the whole of the cloud prize that's out there. So I promised a demonstration for each one of these sections. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to turn that over to Daniel. And Daniel's going to show you us running on the private cloud, on Azure, on GCP, and do so with single sign-on and make it a very simple and straightforward process.
So as Jonathan said, what I'm about to show you is actually the foundation for the overall rest of the demo that I'll be giving you today. So what I'm actually going to show you is 3 setups that I did on 3 different places, right? So I actually picked Azure for my first setup. I picked Google Cloud for my second setup, and I actually have an on-premise upstream Kubernetes that's using pretty beefy hardware that you cannot even procure on cloud providers. And I'll be showing you how I actually perform all these distributed actions, right? So no other solution will allow you to actually integrate different cloud providers and provide a consistent experience across all of them, right? So we have we've gone great lengths to simplify the operation of MinIO on top of Kubernetes. And on top of that, we also build a nice intuitive user interface for you to manage, right? So you're going to notice a common thing, which is it's all about self-service. And then we're also building this very strong experience so that you can control all the access across all these different cloud providers to a single external identity provider. So in this case, I have single sign-on enabled. So it doesn't matter if I'm running, like, let's say I start on my Google Cloud setup. I can go into my single sign-on instance, perform a login operation, and boom, I'm inside my operator UI, right? So I'm greeted by a list of tenants. And it's pretty much the same story, right? If I go into my Azure instance, now I can just single sign on. I'm already logged in. I just hop into that other cluster. I can see the one tenant that I actually set up on Azure. And the same story if I go to my bare metal deployment, right? Single sign on, and I'm greeted by the same UI, right? It's consistent. It's simple. It's the same experience, whether you are running on Google Cloud, Azure, AWS, Oracle, IBM, or even on-premise. Doesn't matter if you're using Tanzu, DPP, or OpenShift, or just upstream Kubernetes, is the same consistent experience.
All right. So when you think about the hybrid cloud infrastructure or the multi-cloud, we just showed you that MinIO is running on whether it's EKS, AKS, GKE. We run across all of them. And we have, again, major instances in every other cloud that you can think of, including all the long tail providers. I didn't reference it specifically on that slide, but we've got 20,000 plus on the OVHs and the Oracles of the world. It's also about the private cloud. So we showed you a private cloud instance, but we have gone into great lengths on our Tanzu integration, and we'll be doing more of that on the OpenShift integrations on a go-forward basis. And then it's also on the edge. One of the things that distinguishes MinIO and the edge cloud we think is going to be really, really important, and is not a huge focus for this presentation, but we think it's going to be really, really important, is that MinIO is incredibly lightweight. And so therefore we can run at the edge in ways that nobody else can. So we're less than 100 MB, and that's including all of the components that we've added in the console and everything else, and the operator. And so that makes us really a force to be reckoned with when you're talking about edge cloud storage.
A quick question here.
Yeah.
So are you going to talk about your deployment architectures, whether this is distributed only, whether you have a centralized or external deployment mode? Like, what options does the customer have in rolling this out and deciding how they want to offer storage to their Kubernetes environment?
Yeah, AB, do you want to take that now, or do you want to pause on that?
Yeah, I think Daniel will show the provisioning right at that time. We can go deeper into these details.
Okay.
Yeah, he's going to show the provisioning of tenants, right? Daniel?
Yeah, we're going to touch into provisioning and also the replication of cloud providers, data tiering later on. And that will actually show that, for every customer, they can pick and match whatever fits their needs, right? They perhaps want to keep sensitive data on premise while they want to keep some production data on the cloud, and they can actually mix and match and replicate to fit their needs.
Yeah, there's actually a live demo of all these. It's coming.
Excellent. Okay. So let's summarize this section. I think hopefully we've shown you through the product and through the data that the proof is really in the numbers. At this point, when it comes to multi-cloud and hybrid cloud, we are clearly the most broadly deployed. We have the highest penetration, and now we're going to get into the product features that we think are going to allow us to retain that lead. The next is that we're really pushing things forward from the innovation perspective. We already run on every single cloud today, and that's a function of our investments in Kubernetes, investments in just being cloud native. But what's up next for us is click and deploy. Again, making it simpler and simpler it is to adopt MinIO and reduce the friction associated with that. And again, our pace here is far faster than everybody else in the market. And that's a function of the fact that we're only doing one thing. We're only doing object storage. It's all we think about. High performance object storage is all we think about. And as a result of that, we can continue to push the rest of the industry into the conversation that we want to have, as opposed to having a conversation they want to have. And it's making them all very, very uncomfortable. And I think the last piece that we want to make sure that came through in this section is that this is a very, very simple strategy, right? It's very straightforward, but as we talked about in the past, simple scales. And we think that this strategy that we put together is very, very eminently achievable. We just have to be better than AWS everywhere else, and we'll capture the biggest prize out there because we're not a fraction of a fraction. We're targeting the whole.